with all that's happening in the world right now with yellow freight, and then I just did a video on cornflake, you know, consolidated freight, and 2 union companies now that have gone under. Well, I thought we'd talk about a company that has stayed in business and is still running strong. I'm talking about the Bullfrogs, ABF. So my last couple videos have been about fallen companies, and I decided we needed to do a video about a company that's still here. Since the yellow freight thing is just happening right now, and we talked about the cornflakes, you know, CF happening 20 years ago, I figured we'd talk about the Bullfrogs, the ABF. They're called Bullfrogs. That's a trucking term for them. I assume it's because their trucks are green. But yeah, I decided to look into it a little bit, and wow, I got a whole bunch of great information about them. And here's one. If it wasn't for great management in the late 1980s, they would have been out of business. They were almost put out of business. And it was some real finagling, just some quick moves, some great thinking by a great leader that kept them in business. And we will get to that later. I got a whole book of notes here, so when you see me looking down or flipping back and forth, I got so much stuff about this company. So, you know, don't mind if I get lost a little bit here. And I have pictures. The ABF made a lot of acquisitions over the years, and I have a lot of pictures of them companies. Some I don't have, so some I couldn't find anything out about. So if you don't see a picture, it's because I don't have it and couldn't find it. And so let's get into this, where it started. I couldn't find any information out really originally, except that it was started in 1923 in Fort Smith, Arkansas, as OK Transfer. It's a company I couldn't find any info out about. I couldn't find out who started OK Transfer or anything. It's like it didn't exist. The only existence that I found is that it's the original company that became ABF. But in 1935, they bought Arkansas Motor Freight, and they took over that name. At this time, all they did was local work in Arkansas. They pretty much just stayed local. In 1951, a former lawyer named Robert A. Young bought the company, AMF, Arkansas Motor Freight. And in 1956, Young acquired Best Motor Freight. They were a Dallas-based company. Now, as we're going through these acquisitions, you have to remember the regulations at the time. I don't know, we talk about deregulation. I guess this would be regulation, where you had to own your lanes. I'm going to do a lot more studying up on that, but that's why they bought a lot of these companies, and we'll explain when they're buying these companies what lanes they're getting out of it. So yeah, so he bought Best Motor Freight. At that point, in 1957, he merged the companies into Arkansas Best Freight Systems. I always thought the Arkansas Best Freight was just, you know, an arrogant thing, like, hey, we're the best freight. But no, it turns out it was the Arkansas Motor Freight, and Best Motor Freight became Arkansas Best Freight Systems. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. In 1961, they acquired a company called Heelser Cartage out of Kansas City, Missouri. And so obviously that gave them a lane that way. You can see how they're building out around them. You know, now they have Arkansas, they have Dallas area, now they have Kansas City area. You'll see them slowly spanning out from there. And it's pretty interesting. It makes you wonder, would they have bought these companies back then if they didn't need the lanes? I mean, after deregulation now, I mean, you know, I drive wherever I want, you know, or wherever we want to go, and we don't have to worry about who owns the lanes and everything else. I mean, you can go get your own authority, as we've seen in the last couple of years. So many people did when they thought that truck drivers make $4 a mile and they should just go buy a truck and get authority. Not working out so well for them now. All right, let me get back on subject here. In the same year, 1961, ABF purchased Delta Motor Lines, and this expanded their reach into New Orleans. Yep, keep expanding out. 1966, they formed ABC, Arkansas Best Corporation, as a holding company for Arkansas Best Freight and these companies that they were acquiring up. And yeah, so in 1968, ABF acquired Fast Freight, and this extended them into New York. That's going pretty far now. In 1969, they bought Crema Truck Lines. I don't know which it is. This got them into Chicago. So yeah, just expanding out. In the 1970s, ABF bought a whole bunch of different companies. They bought Youngblood Truck Lines. They bought a company called H.A. Day Truck Lines, a company called Associated Transport, another company called Western Gillette. Apparently Western Gillette was a pretty big company. I actually got some pretty good pictures of them. And they bought part of Great Lakes Express. Then they bought Acres Motor Line. Acres Motor Line had the route down Route 1. This connected their northeast to their southeast operations. Pretty interesting. It seems like things were a lot harder back then to do. In 1979, they purchased the Navajo Freight Lines, and that got them to California. Now, Navajo Freight Lines is not the same company as Navajo Express. I actually looked it up. I plan on doing a story about Navajo someday, because I plan on doing a story about all the companies I can, if you guys keep enjoying them. But Navajo Express was actually started, I believe it was 1981. So, you know, maybe they kind of banked on that Navajo name, or who knows. I know that Navajo Express is out of Denver, Colorado. So, and then they really focus on the Indian thing. So, but we'll get to that some other time. So when they bought Navajo Freight and bought all them other companies, it actually made them the 25th, from 25th biggest company to 9th biggest company. That is a huge jump. Huge jump. So in 1972, they went public on the New York Stock Exchange. In 1973, Robert A. Young, and it's actually Robert A. Young Jr., but he died, and Robert A. Young III took over. And this guy, just some of the things I read about him, was pretty amazing. Yeah, you're definitely going to want to see this story towards the end there. But in I'm sorry, I went back a little bit there. Went from 79 back to 73. But yeah. Okay, so in 1981, they were the 8th largest company with 106 terminals. In 1982, they purchased East Texas Motor Freight, which expanded them to 158 terminals and made them the sixth largest company. That's crazy. Now, here's where we talk about the great management. 1988, August 8, 1988. I'm going to come back to this because I am doing the timeline of them buying things, and the end is almost a story to its own. In 1988, they endured a hostile takeover by becoming a private company. Yeah. So, interesting. I didn't quite know what that meant, but then I looked into it. But 4 years later, in 1988, they became a public company again, this time traded on the NASDAQ. Yeah. So in 1997, they created the company called U-Pack Moving. which you've seen them before. They have on a lot of their trailers, I guess depending on the size of your move, they'll drop a trailer off, you load it, they haul it, drop it off at your new house and unload it. I've also seen they have some basically pods. I'm sure they're not allowed to call them pods. I'm pretty sure that name is taken, but basically pods that go on the back of flatbeds to haul around, I guess, in case they have multiple stops. Yeah, very interesting. So that was in 1997. See, I told you I was going to get lost here at some point. I went all over the place. I had quite a few sources for this information. So I was all over the place. But in 2006, Robert A. Young III retired as CEO after, so that would be 43 years he was CEO of that company, and a great man. He did remain chairman of the board. I don't know if he still is. I should have looked that up, so I had it for you. In 2012, they bought Panther Expedited. I didn't know that they owned Panther Expedited, but apparently they do. So in 2014, ABC, Arkansas Best Corporation, was renamed Ark Best Corporation. All one word, Ark Best Corp. I don't know why. Doesn't really say much about why. So in 2015, they bought Smart Lines Transportation and Bear Transportation. So that's all I can find as far as what they've acquired over time. But here is what happened in 1988. All right, 1988. It was August of 1988, and I read a couple stories about it where they said, you know, they came into work, everybody was happy. You know, their stock had plummeted the year before a bit, but so did everybody else's in a stock market crash. They were happy. They had just found ground where they were going to build a new headquarters, and basically it was a happy day at work. And CEO Robert A. Young III was blindsided by a hostile takeover attempt. Now, I thought, you know, maybe Yellow was trying to take them over. Maybe, you know, one of the big companies at the time was trying to take them over. And this was not the case. Emmanuel Perlman is a 28-year-old, was at that time, a 28-year-old from New York that had bought over 5% of ABF stock during the stock market crash of '87. Apparently, their stock had gone the whole way down to $8 a share. When I saw, I think they call that Black Monday. Yeah, it was in there. But when he did that, he also formed Razorback Acquisitions. And the idea of Razorback was to buy controlling interest, offering $240 million for it. And Robert A. Young, he actually admitted, he's like, I didn't know much about this at the time. I didn't realize when you're publicly traded, anybody can buy you. You're always for sale. And so Young let Morgan Stanley know, who handled their business at the time, said, we're not interested. Perlman came back and said, well, it's not your choice. And then they bought more stock, upping their ownership to 10%. Now, here's the thing. Here's why I say this company would have failed if this went through. Not necessarily would have failed. It would have been out of business. Perlman's reason for wanting the company was simply because he wanted 3 of the Los Angeles truck terminals. Just the land. He didn't want the truck terminals, wanted the land that ABF owned. The value had skyrocketed from what they had bought it from. I mean, it's LA, you know, things get weird out there. And if he had gotten it, he would have gotten them properties, did whatever he's going to do, developing, whatever, and he would have sold off all the assets quickly and left the rest of the company in ruin. That's pretty interesting. There's no information about Razorback at all. I can't find anything. I found some stuff about Manny Perlman. Apparently he was into real big into consulting, different kinds of investing in casinos, things like that. I know very little about LA. I've not done a lot of California running. Are there casinos in California or in LA? I don't know. I know a lot of different states have them. I don't know if that's what he was looking for, or just looking to flip some property or build condos. Who knows? But that almost ruined the 6th largest company in the United States. Here's how he got out of it. Young got a New York-based company called Kelso & Company, who's still in business, to buy ABC for $316 million. But there was a timetable for him to be paid back for that. At the time, apparently, I don't know when they acquired them because I couldn't find it in my list of everything that they acquired, but apparently they owned USA Truck and Trans-States lines, and they sold both of them to also help raise some money. But now, so 6 weeks after it started, it was over. It ended. But now they had to put the company back together. So now they're trying to put a company back together. And what they did was they purchased Worldway Corp. This just seems to take some big old balls right here. They purchased Worldway Corp, and Worldway was the holding corporation for Carolina Freight. And that basically took them all over the East Coast market. It actually got them the whole East Coast market. But this put America's best corporation, or Arkansas's best corporation, $450 million in debt. And the amount of assets that they had was $45 million in assets. Wow. This is when they became a private company for 4 years before they went back on and traded under the NASDAQ. During that time, man, Robert A. Young is just an amazing guy. And this is a second generation guy who apparently understood, even though he didn't understand the stock too much, apparently he understood everything about trucking, and he was, man, very smart. I'm sure that he had pretty smart people behind him, but I think that's what makes a smart CEO. He did a pretty long quote where he talks about all kinds of things. That it was a very tight 4 years, on a very tight budget the whole time. They never knew if they were going to pull out, if they had to make every payment on time, to get the company back. And he did say in this interview that I read, pretty cool article. It says, "I think the company came out of it well." Yeah, but probably smarter, actually, when you think about it. I mean, they pulled through this, but maybe that's the reason that they're not, we don't need to talk about yellow anymore. Anyway, he did say then at the quote, "But if I had screwed up, we were dead." Or if we had screwed up. If the company screwed up, if they didn't make their payment, anything didn't go right, they were dead. And that's pretty crazy. So, let's talk about what's going on with the company right now. I mean, is their stock down? Are they, are they on the verge of going under like Yellow and CF did years ago? Well, let's see. Well, I really have got to get a new screw for this external speaker I have above me. It lost one and keeps hanging down, but that's a whole nother subject. I mean, I'll start a GoFundMe if you guys want to buy me a new speaker or just some screws or just chrome for the truck. And no, please do not donate money. I'm not starting a GoFundMe. Anyway, so how is ABF doing these days? Well, are they about to go under just like Yellow? Are they going to follow in the footsteps? It doesn't appear so. Not at all. I'm sorry, I got my AC on pretty high there. It's making some noise. Anyway, as of August 17th, 2023, I'm making this video August 19th, 2023. But their stock was trading at almost $105 per share. As of right now, they have 15,700 employees, give or take a few. Revenue last year, and remember, Yellow was still in business last year, so direct competition. Revenue of $5.32 billion, which revenue's cool, but it doesn't always matter. It's your net that matters. I mean, yeah, it really matters what it comes out to. Their net income last year was $298.21 million with a union company. So, there's a lot of people that say that the greedy workers, the union, everything else is what brought down Yellow, what brought down CF. There's a lot of people saying that, but here we have a company that's not the case. Going strong. Sales growth last year of 33.77%. Man, a growth of 1/3 in 1 year. So their stock hit a high of almost $120 in the last month. And it is slowly trickling down, but that was to be expected with Yellow going under. Their stock has usually always traded in the mid to high 80s that I see, over the last year or so. So, yeah, very interesting. It's trickling down. Now, here's the question. Who is going to benefit from Yellow going under? Well, a lot of companies are going to benefit. Old Dominion's going to benefit. Saia's going to benefit. A lot of companies like that, but they are non-union companies. So when you have union shippers, like we have, one that comes to mind is, I live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We have a big Kellogg's plant there, and they are a union company. So when Yellow goes under, they're going to look for another union company to do it. And the main competition is ABF. ABF is going to pick up a lot of that business. Now, like I said, Old Dominion, XPO, Saia, all them, they're going to pick up a lot of it too. I'm kind of interested to see. I wouldn't hesitate to let the stock trickle down, wait for this bankruptcy to become final, and then see what happens to it. But don't take investment advice from me. I've never invested anything. Actually, I did. My wife will tell you I invested $100 one time in Yellow. That's a true story. That was years ago, the first time they were going under. Well, I've lost $100 on way more stupid things. But the company today is run by a guy named Seth Runce, R-U-N-S-E. And he was, actually I read a bit about him in an article, and the article was from one of these business magazines called the Top 40 Under 40. I don't remember exactly when it was written, and it didn't say his age at the time, but a pretty young guy came up through the ranks, and yeah, it just seems like a well-run company. I mean, just I don't know much about them. I have a friend who retired from them, but other than that, I really don't know much. But I've learned so much here, and man, 1988 to 1992, great management. And my hat off to you, Robert A. Young III, who is still with us today. Apparently, I didn't find anything to say otherwise. Throw a couple more pictures up here, but yeah, great company, and man, I really appreciate you guys watching these videos. I'm getting a lot of response. Just so many great stories from old timers, new drivers who talk about the stories that they've heard. And by the way, when I say old timers, that is yes, I mean that. I love the old timers of trucking. I remember hanging out at truck stops. I love hearing the old stories, and just those of you guys that paved the way. For those of us that are still out here, it's a much different industry right now, but you guys definitely paved the way and did some great stuff for us. So anyway, Thanks for watching. If you have any ideas for stories or anything, you just want to get a hold of me, feel free to email me at finchresources@gmail.com. I'll put it right down here. I'll also put a link in the description for that email. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram under Trucking Resources. And I'm going to start, I have so many companies recommended to me, so many lists, so I'm actually going to start doing something where on Facebook you can, you know, pretty much vote on what you guys want next. Because I don't care. I love doing the stories. I find so much great information out about all these companies. So I might do like some kind of voting process. So definitely go over to my Facebook. Yeah, Facebook, Trucking Resources. I put up some other funny stuff and cool stuff sometimes. But hey, thanks for watching, guys, and I will have another one pretty soon.